Hello and a warm welcome to the CNBC Africa Special, a live broadcast coming to you from our Sandton studios. I'm Gugulethu Cele. Now, earlier this week, Johannesburg Mayor Johannesburg delivered his State of the City speech for 2015. As the so-called City of Gold, Johannesburg is not only the economic heart of the province, but the country as well. Mayor Johannesburg joins me now to take us through his vision for the city and its residents. Remember that you can also join this conversation by tweeting using the hashtag Joburg410, and there's several tweets that are already doing the rounds, and you can participate in this discussion. We also have our esteemed audience members from various centers of society as well as MMCs who will elaborate further on some particular portfolios. But first up, the man who is the Chief Executive of Johannesburg Incorporated. Good to have you with us today, sir. I want us to pick up on the overall theme of your speech for 2015, making sure that tomorrow is better than today. Maybe if we can walk through the progress that has been made so far, and by saying so, it's the Joburg city that you inherited and the kind of Joburg city you'd like to leave behind following your term in office.
Thank you very much and good day. I think it's important that we confirm that in fact today is better than yesterday, and that rather tomorrow will be better than today. And I think for us it was an important theme to choose because it enabled us to reflect on the progress that we've made as a city. We inherited an institution that essentially had come from ruins in the apartheid days into building a financially stable organization that has been leading and at the forefront of financial re-engineering of municipalities in the country. We currently are a credit-rated agency that is rated by international agencies and is able to raise significant credit from the markets. And we were at the forefront of reintroducing the municipal bond market in the country as the city of Johannesburg, and very active in the bond market. And for us, it's an indication of an institution that has built its capacity to manage its finances in a prudent way. But not only are we managing our finances in a prudent way, we set out at the beginning of this term of office to invest 100 billion South African rands in infrastructure development over a period of 10 years. When we started, this had just been after the period of the World Cup. We started when our capital budget was standing at around 3.9 billion rands. And when we committed to re-engineer our finances to enable us to invest that 100 billion, some were a bit skeptical to say, is it possible? And I'm happy to say that we currently have a capital budget in excess of 10 billion rands, and that has enabled us to do a number of things, and we've kind of looked at our investment programs in three ways, kind of separated it into three focal areas of investment. The first is about ensuring that those communities that do not have adequate access to infrastructure get access to infrastructure, that we address backlogs of communities that haven't had water, sanitation, electricity, housing, and so on. At the second level, we've looked at recapitalizing aging infrastructure. There's a lot of infrastructure that's aging, and you can witness that if you look at the amount of unaccounted for water as a result of aging infrastructure and the age of our road networks, our bridges, and other infrastructure. So we're investing in recapitalizing that infrastructure. And the third is about building a city of the future. Rethinking our city, thinking of a city that's more compact, more accessible. We inherited a city that was designed for segregation, for exclusion, and we're building a city that's more compact. We have defined what we call the corridors of freedom, which are the strategic corridors that we've identified, along which not only are we introducing public transport access, but introducing land uses and intensity of land use that brings people closer to opportunities in a city and brings those opportunities closer to people. And this infrastructure would range from the road networks to bulk infrastructure, but it's also about digital infrastructure, the rollout of broadband, creating free Wi-Fi hotspots throughout the city. We did say in the State of the City address that Bramfontein this month is evolving into a wireless mesh. It's an area where we have the bulk of young people concentrating, particularly because of the location of the two universities, Wits and UJ, University of Johannesburg. And thus we've identified it as an area for a wireless mesh so that you can get Wi-Fi access from point to point within Braamfontein and in the university precinct. And that has already started. So we're quite excited. And it builds at the back of the Tsimologong precinct that we had developed with Wits University. I can go on and on as I get excited.
I can tell,
present
Mayor.
Another state of the city.
I can tell, and that's exactly what we want. We've got a mayor who's energized and a mayor who's committed to the plans that he's put in place, which I think a lot of Johannesburg city residents appreciate. But let's touch on one of the biggest themes that you mentioned, which is the issue of infrastructure. Naturally, we cannot avoid the issue of the current e-toll situation, which appeals to the Gauteng residents. But this infrastructure, it's a difficult one because you've got this new developments that we see taking place, just the rapid bus transport system also unfolding and developing here in Gauteng. How do you balance these new initiatives with the current structures that we have? And I say this because I'm trying to link the more formal smart city that you're trying to introduce with traditional systems that have always worked, like the taxis on the road.
Well, starting with public transportation, as I said, along our corridors of freedom, we've identified the need to invest extensively in infrastructure that would support public transportation and therefore greater ease for mobility in the city of Johannesburg. You would know that an area like Sandton is experiencing high levels of congestion and the situation is getting worse by the day. And we've identified this as a strategic area of investment. This is the commercial heartland of the city, not just the city, in fact, of the South African economy, the commercial heartland of Africa, so to say. And it's important that we ensure that it is accessible from a mobility point of view. We're investing in a bus rapid transit system to support Sandton. There would be a loop around the core center of Sandton that would enable people to have greater access to Sandton and easier access to Sandton so that people have an incentive to leave their cars at home and hop onto a bus and they would be able to access the city.
I want us to talk about that term incentive because it almost seems as though people need some kind of financial reward. Being told that you're not going to have to sit in 2 hours of traffic, spend your own money on petrol, it almost seems as though it's not enough for Joburg residents. Are we looking at alternative means here?
I think there's an opportunity cost. I think that people would be able to make the decisions to say, am I prepared to sit in traffic for 2 hours and have that time, as opposed to seeing people who literally spend 30 minutes to get from one point to the other on dedicated lanes. As I say, the infrastructure we're building is along dedicated public transport lanes that would support the public transport network. It's not a financial incentive, it's an infrastructure incentive. It's the ability for people to move with greater ease in and around Sandton. But we're also supporting that with the cycle lanes so that we create easier access, not just from a mobility point of view, that is in terms of buses, but also that people can access the city and in particular Sandton with greater ease on their bicycles. They can walk. It's a very important thing for us that we create infrastructure that supports greater access to the city. If you think about it this way, the greatest public infrastructure asset that we have, public open access infrastructure that we have, is actually the roads, but these roads are dedicated to cars. And we're saying we need to rethink the way in which we invest in the infrastructure so that it's more accessible, so that more and more people can use it in the form of cycling, walking, but also having adequate bus transport that would support it. And then on the other point you were making, we have identified the need to recapitalize the highway networks, the two critical sets of the highway networks in Johannesburg, the M1 and M2, that support the city of Johannesburg and interlinks with the rest of the Gauteng freeway network. And we've said that having taken into account the reality that whilst we need to invest a lot of money in this, the feedback that I think as government we've received with regards to how we finance this almost takes out tolling as an option. And we're saying we'll have to recapitalize them without tolling as an option so that you're able to create better highways, expanding the highways, but also highways that have dedicated systems for public transport. So not only are we looking at expanding them, we're also looking at expanding their use and therefore create better access to our city.
I thought the no e-tolls part would get a resounding cheer from the audience, but it's a tough audience, I see. But naturally, infrastructure also needs electricity and energy supply, Mr. Mayor, and that's also something that is a significant threat to South Africa. But I understand that there are several initiatives. The Calvin power station, if I'm not mistaken, which has been posed as a significant opportunity to help generate electricity in South Africa. And maybe if you can also give us insights on stage 1 load shedding. I understand that Joburg in particular can still manage to keep the lights on.
Yes, I mean, we're looking at interventions both on the supply side and on the demand side. On the supply side, we have opportunities to bring new energy sources onto the grid. Calvin being a case in point, which is currently producing at an average, at a maximum of 200 megawatts. Currently, there's a tender underway to recapitalize it and get it back to 600 megawatts that should be able to support the infrastructure needs of the city. We're also looking at new innovative technologies that have been tested throughout the world. There's a technology we're reviewing that's being implemented in Japan and the USA that generates electricity from the turbines, rather installing turbines into your water pipes. So the bulk water pipes, you install turbines and you're able to generate electricity from that. And we're looking at that very closely because we think in a city where we're recapitalizing about 900 kilometers of bulk water pipes, this is an opportunity to put in that investment together with the turbines and therefore be able to generate electricity.
Mayor, why send it out to tender though, instead of involving SMMEs and even members of the private sector? And I'd like to use an example here, Calgrow M3. They're well known as an infrastructure company who are involved in the development of Vlierhof, an area I'm sure you're familiar with, but also the recent grave site that they've acquired right on the Golden Highway, which I understand will be completely off the grid, and they're relying on solar energy to help power that grave area that they've purchased.
We're also partnering with the private sector. We've had engagements with both the South African Property Owners Association and Business Unity South Africa about what energy they can bring onto the grid. So we're saying the initiatives can't always be reliant on government. There's the capacity of private sector companies to generate their own infrastructure that they can then transact with us into the grid. We're actually engaging with the National Energy Regulator to say, how do we then facilitate a transaction between those that have excess energy that can be transacted into the grid with the municipality. So we're looking at the multiple options, both on the generation and therefore supply side, but also we're looking at interventions on the demand side. We have installed smart meters. We continue with the installation of smart meters in the city of Johannesburg. But this is not just helping us deal with matters related to billing and revenue collection. We're now able to introduce a mechanism that we call load limiting. So we can actually inform the device that the amount of energy that we will be supplying to the household would be reduced by this amount. And then the household can make the choice as to which appliances to switch off.
May
so
I
when
have
they
to come in here
okay,
and ask you, what does this mean for the residents of Orlando West in Soweto who have been protesting, as we've all documented, with regard to the electricity usage in that particular region?
I think that the situation of Orlando West does require serious discussion. I have two of my colleagues who are currently here who will be going to Orlando West this afternoon to have a discussion with members of the community and to engage with the community about two things that are important. The first is that as a country we're experiencing high levels of demand, and therefore the supply side can't meet our needs. And if you can't control it, you wouldn't be able to meet your energy requirements. If people demand to get electricity for free, then they're not conscious and judicious in their use of the energy, because then people look at it as an abundant resource. Whereas if you are conscious that this resource is not abundant and I need to manage it judiciously, both for myself but for the rest of the country, then you'd be a lot more conscious. So from that point of view, it's important that we enable people to appreciate that paying for municipal services is a responsibility that would enable our municipalities to survive. But then there's also the reality that if people are poor, we've created an expanded social package where people are able to register and we're able to assist households that can't afford, and that's the approach that we're taking with regards to the situation in Orlando West.
Mr. Mayor, thank you so much. We will be coming back to your colleagues to find out what they're going to say to the residents of Orlando. We're going to a quick commercial break. More on the State of the City of Johannesburg address when we come back. A warm welcome back to the CNBC Africa special broadcast, where we're sitting down with Johannesburg Mayor Dau. Well, just before the ad break, you had alluded to the electricity crisis that we're facing, not only in the city, but the residents of Orlando West who have been protesting. And two of your MMCs will be going there. If we can make a mic available to actually get to you, and if you could share the sentiments, the key issues that you're hoping to address, and hopefully allow the residents of Orlando to understand. MMC, if you could please give us a response to that. We're just waiting for a microphone to get to you, and then we'll come back to the question that we had with Chris Yelland from EE Publishers, who's known to be very strict and vocal about the electricity crisis we have in the country. MMC, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon and thanks, Coco. I am Cele Mfikwe, MMC responsible for infrastructure services and environment. I think, as the mayor has said, that there are two issues that we need to address with not just the Orlando West community, but the residents in general, about the need for our communities to pay for services and conserve the limited resources that we have. From time to time, when I speak about this issue, I also include water as well, because equally we are pressed in terms of the supply and demand for water, and the need for us to continue to protect and conserve these scarce resources. In terms of the Orlando communities, as the mayor was saying, we are going to be meeting with them, me and MMC Molwele, expanding and explaining the need for us to conserve these limited resources, and thereby ensuring that as community members we take responsibility. They have raised questions about qualification and them participating in the expanded package that the mayor has referred to. So we will explain what needs to happen, and the fact that not everybody qualifies to be on ESP, because that's one thing that I think our people are missing, that we cannot put everybody on the package. It should be according to the assessments done per household and the income levels that we're getting in a household that says they are indigent. So we will be going there. Today we're meeting stakeholders. There will be a public meeting, according to my understanding, on Monday, where we'll speak with generally the community. We are a local government, a city that wants to serve its people, and we want them to work with us as well. But equally, as we provide services to communities, they have a responsibility to pay and take equal and full responsibility for those services. We can't go they're raising a flat rate issue, and MMC Makubu was saying maybe it's time for us to have a discussion on a flat rate. The unfortunate scenario now is that NERSA has regulated tariffs. So there's no flat rate that is being spoken about. So it's a discussion that we need to take. But for now, people are tariffed. They have to pay according to the tariffs that are set up until a different paradigm is undertaken. So that is part of the conversations that we will have with the community of Orlando East. And I know it's going to spread through. So we have to gear ourselves to talk to everybody about this issue, because ultimately we have a responsibility to ensure that in 20 years' time, 10 years' time, we still have electricity, we still have water. For now, we're really running very slim in the provision of the two services. Thank you.
MMC, thank you so much for providing feedback there. If we could get that mic back to Chris Yelland, who also has a question to ask, which is related to the electricity and energy crisis that we're facing in South Africa. Chris, if you could go ahead with your question, please.
Good afternoon. Chris Yelland from EE Publishers. Mayor Dau, may I congratulate you on your initiatives with energy provision in the area of Johannesburg. And I'd like to ask two questions. Can you give us further detail about solar photovoltaic utility scale installations, generation installations that were mentioned in the State of the Province address that could be installed around the province, because the sun also shines in Gauteng and in Johannesburg, and we would like to see such generation opportunities being explored here, and that it also extends to rooftop solar PV installations on commercial buildings and houses as well, and whether the City of Johannesburg is going to follow Cape Town in introducing feed-in tariffs where households and commercial businesses may generate into the grid to provide electricity for the city and for the country. My second question is, I'd like to ask your assurance today to the people of South Africa and to Johannesburgers that while Eskom is busy load shedding on stage 1 today, now, as we speak, that the city of Johannesburg is immune from this load shedding, as you indicated, and that no load shedding is taking place in the city of Johannesburg now, as we speak, with stage 1 Eskom load shedding. Thank you.
Chris, thank you so much for your question and comment there. I think the second part of that question is a difficult one for you, Mayor, but Chris obviously needs a response. Maybe let's pick up on the first point there, alternative sources of electricity, and also commitment that Johannesburgers will not be affected by stage 1 load shedding.
Thank you very much, Gugu, and Chris, thank you very much for the questions. Let me talk about the issues that were raised by the Premier in the State of the Province address. Premier indicated that the intention is for provincial government to use provincial government buildings as essentially what would be a solar farm for photovoltaic panels that would generate electricity into the grid, so to say, from a provincial point of view. It's something that the Premier has committed to. In fact, I was in a discussion with the Premier 2 weeks ago at which he indicated the plans that would be implemented in the provincial government. I do think it's a bit premature for me to speak on his behalf, but I can reassure you that the Premier is still committed to the program of photovoltaic energy. We've taken a slightly different approach as the municipality. As you would know, we are engaged in distribution of electricity as the City of Johannesburg. We gave City Power a mandate last year already to redefine its business into an energy business. By that I'm saying, now that we're a distribution company, City Power is a distribution company, we've said, set yourself different goals, and they are presenting to us in the next few months a new business case about how they would be undertaking this. And the idea is that they would look at a broad array of energy sources. Gas reticulation as a means of replacing electricity in certain instances is an option that we've said they should consider. Only 15% of Joburgers currently use reticulated gas, and we said we need to expand it so that you're able to reduce pressure on the grid in Johannesburg. But we've also said to them, look at photovoltaic at rooftops in households in what we've defined as a virtual power station. There's a business case they've developed that's called a virtual power station, in our words, because what it enables us to do is to have the power generated by households on their own PV panels, but they're able to transact with us through the grid. But it is not a plant, so to say. It's not the municipality going out to capitalize a new plant. It says we can enter into a transactional arrangement with our communities to generate energy, and we would be able to then feed off the energy that we're getting from our residents. So that's the sort of business case that we're getting from City Power, and we're looking forward to it. As I said, it's a complex issue. Remember, City Power is responsible for not just distributing electricity, but they're also responsible for generating surpluses for the organization to enable us to continue the work. So it's been a delicate balance to get to a point where you maintain the municipality financially healthy whilst you're looking at these new energy sources. That's why it's taken a bit of time, but they've given me assurance, and Councillor Mfikwe can confirm that City Power has given us assurance that they would be able to come back with a new business case of an energy company that's not just a distribution company. Coming to the second question, the second question was?
Commitment that Joburgers will not be affected by stage 1 load shedding.
And there are 2 points I need to make. There are 2 distributors of electricity in Johannesburg. We distribute to 50% of Johannesburg. The interventions that we have are able to mitigate insofar as the City Power customers are concerned. So with regards to City Power customers, when we're at load shedding stage 1, we're able to mitigate. Currently, we do not have an arrangement with Eskom that enables us to mitigate in Eskom supply areas. So there are areas like Sandton, Soweto, parts of Midrand, and so on, where we're unable to mitigate in the same way. But we're having ongoing discussions with Eskom to say our intention is to ensure that Johannesburg keeps its lights on and that the economy in Johannesburg continues to pump, so to say, even during supply-side pressure periods. And we think that everybody should move into the system that we're introducing and are creating both incentives and disincentives in that regard. So I can confirm that with regards to city power supply areas where we have stage one, we're able to intervene. And there are different ways in which we intervene. So when Eskom says to us, we need stage one, and this is the amount of electricity we need, we're able to bring in Kelvin and the energy they generate. We introduce that, and that mitigates. We're able to switch off geysers through our ripple control relays. So instead of switching off the lights, people have to do with slightly colder showers, but you're able to intervene through ripple control relays, and they give us about 50 megawatts of energy that we can reduce through the ripple control relays. And then the third is about the load limiting program, where we're able to use smart meters. So it is this combination of initiatives that enable us to not do load shedding, but rather do load limiting, ripple control relays, and other interventions that reduce the need for load shedding in the city of Johannesburg. We're escalating the number of interventions and the investments. We're speeding up ripple control relays and smart meters so that, in fact, we can have more and more people that can contribute in this way, and thus reduce more and more the pressure that we would get under load shedding.
Mr. Mayor, I must tell you that thank you so much for your sentiments. But before we have to wrap up, unfortunately, because we are pressed for time, there's a lot for us to explore. There's still the SMMCE sector and the other initiatives. But I want us to focus on Brand Johannesburg. Is it taking strain, especially on the back of the xenophobic violence that we saw unfolding in the CBD? And if so, what initiatives are you looking to implement to help change and shape Johannesburg into that African Renaissance city of the future, which it has been known to be?
You know, there are a number of initiatives that we're undertaking under the auspices of the Johannesburg Migration Advisory Council. And in fact, I think this is the time at which I can ask Reverend Gugulethu, who is chair of the advisory panel that advises the mayor and the mayoral committee on matters of migration, to make comments. But I also think that we should acknowledge the role of the churches. The South African Council of Churches, through Bishop Mpumlwana, has been very active working with both the city and provincial government on interventions to mitigate the impact of xenophobia. So whilst there's been a dent, there's been energy that's come through from Joburg, as both of South African birth, but also those of foreign origin, that are contributing to the resolution of the problem. So at this point, may I take the opportunity to ask maybe for a comment from Reverend Gugulethu.
We've got a minute to go. We'll get the roving mic to the two gentlemen, and if you could both keep your comments very brief, unfortunately, because we are pressed for time. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Mayor, and thank you, Gugu. I think that the state of the city of the Executive Mayor was very clear by saying that our city is your city, which means that the city of Johannesburg, which belong to South Africans, belong to migrants, who I am for 20 years. And coming to the issue of what we plan to combat, to fight against xenophobia. And I have the privilege of spending 5 hours with the head of state, the Excellency Jacob Zuma. And we were very proud to say that what we will do against xenophobia in South Africa, we have started more than 7 years in the city of Johannesburg, because we prefer to be more proactive than reactive. And when we say we, it means we find ourselves as a potential victims of a xenophobic attack. I'm here for 20 years now. I left Congo, my beloved country, the Democratic Republic of Congo, in 1994. And we think that, as the bishop will say, that we think that this is the country of miracle. In 1994, Dr. Henry Kissinger has failed to bring peace in South Africa. But through the leadership of the church, we have made it. And we think that our action is very proactive and aggressive, and we are proud to say that the city of Johannesburg is a leading city for dealing with migration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to apologize and have to break it there, unfortunately, due to time pressures. But that is where we leave it for today's discussion. This will obviously be ongoing and continue. We have had several interactions on Twitter, which unfortunately we haven't gotten to, Mr. Mayor. But let's get your closing message. And maybe next time you'll bring some bread with you along for us to sample this new initiative that you've also highlighted, Executive Mayor.
Well, thank you very much. Just a point of emphasis, the speech was really focused on young people. We focused on programs ranging from Josie at Work to Vulindlele Josie, which are youth development initiatives that are intended to create opportunities for the many young people in Johannesburg, including creating digital access to the young people of Johannesburg. We will be unveiling what we call a Digital Ambassadors Program in the next 3 weeks, where young people would go out throughout the city, educating people about how to take full advantage of the digital revolution. So this is the era for the young people of this city to take advantage of the opportunities in this great city of Johannesburg.
Fantastic. A city for the youth, and one that is full of potential, but also not excluding those with a little bit more experience. Right, Mr. Mayor? On that note, thank you so much to our audience. Thank you so much. That does bring us to the end of this special live broadcast. A big thank you to my honorable guest, the Johannesburg Mayor, Mpho Bucks-Tau. Until next time, it's goodbye, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you.